All right, I'll do it. Hey, boys and girls, it's Sugar here, Alan. We're gonna do some games today. I'm gonna show you how to set up for them. All right, some 22 gauge steel. I need you guys to cut all along the bottom here and along the top, and you're gonna do a cone shape, okay? So that we can wrap the ends together, and then we'll TIG weld up the middle. I use a shot bag, a leather shot bag. I fill it with buckshot, and some people do sand. I want you guys to actually get into the habit of using buckshot, okay? Simple hammers, simple body tool hammers. These are not the same ones that you hammer in brad nails with. Just get the one that fits in your hand the best. Regular tin sips, I recommend the Milwaukee ones because they're just available anywhere, all right? We're gonna get to forming the first one. You're gonna need about 6 of these if you have more than one player, okay? And you're gonna need more than one player because it's for competition. I mean, come on. I'll show you one that I made earlier. Let me get all 3 out. Okay. So, yours should look like this, all right? But basic the idea is we're making up balloons, okay? If you can't make them yourself, you can get them at King Soopers. But I want to start out with 3 per person, okay? Then you're gonna toss them up into the air and set to a timer of 1 minute. You're gonna try and keep them up in the air the whole time, all 3 going, and play with your friends. The first one to touch the ground, that person's out, okay? So you gotta keep them all going all the same time, all right? We have one more game for you guys. Another quick setup. I use a little bit thicker bar steel. Most of it you can get out with an angle grinder. It doesn't take too much time. All right, let's get going. All right, and that's what they should look like. Pretty quick and simple. The second game is called Leapfrog. You're gonna use both of those spoons that you just made, and you're gonna put them right underneath each other like so, okay? Safety goggles on. Now, if you're into glass blowing, then you can do this on your own. I just went down to the store because I'm just not disciplined in that, and in that art. So I'm gonna use a smaller glass, and then what we do is you put one end underneath the other dish of the spoons, and then you smack them in so that they would flip over and leapfrog into the cup, all right? Now you got 4 spoons. You can go up against your friends, your neighbors, your loved ones, your family members, mom or dad, and compete until you get one in, all right? Going one after the other, smacking them in, getting them in there, safety goggles. I want to keep prizes under $1 million because it can get pretty cost prohibitive, all right? Thanks so much, guys, for joining me. And hopefully we'll see you all real soon, okay? Take care.
Well, today we're looking at a passage in the book of Acts, chapter 13, and just these few verses at the top, 1 through 3. And this is the same passage that we are looking at as a church as we wrap up this series we've been in called Watershed. And so Acts 13, 1 through 3. And what we're going to see in this passage is that the movement that we call Christianity, or the early Jesus movement, is a multiplication kind of movement. Now I'm going to take you back to 3rd grade and give you a little quick math lesson. Multiplication works different than addition, right? When you multiply 2 things together, the result is greater than if you were to just add them together, right? So if you take 5 plus 5, you get 10. But if you take 5 multiplied by 5, you get 25. It's a larger number. And that's how the gospel of Jesus works. When the gospel of Jesus goes out and meets people where they are, that it isn't just addition, the church isn't just added, but it's actually multiplied. So we see Christianity as a multiplication movement. We are called to step out in faith, and the result is that God multiplies our efforts. Now, here what we see in Acts 13, this is in one of the very first churches that ever existed 2,000 years ago. We have the dream team, right? This is like one of the best churches there ever was, and the leadership was one of the best church leadership teams there ever was. Like, this team was like in 2016 when Kevin Durant came to the Golden State Warriors.
Kevin Durant way outside, delivers! Kevin Durant from downtown, it's a 6-point game.
That probably only makes sense to like 3 of you, but it was a team of many giftings, many skill sets. It was a multicultural team. Many languages were spoken on this team. We see a description of this team here at Acts 13, starting in verse 1. It says, "Now there were in the church at Antioch prophets and teachers, Barnabas, Simeon, who was called Niger, Lucius of Cyrene, Manaen, a lifelong friend of Herod the Tetrarch, and Saul." Those are some of the 5 heaviest hitters in the early church movement. And they had a great thing going. But it's fascinating what they do. They don't just remain content with what they have. They don't just say, let's try and build the best church there ever was here. No, they actually continue to seek God and see what He wants. And so we read about this in the next verse. Verse 2, while they were worshiping the Lord and fasting, so they're worshiping and fasting and seeking God, asking what He wants from them, the Holy Spirit said, "Set apart for me Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I have called them." Then after fasting and praying, they laid their hands on them and sent them off. One of the things that we learn from this passage early on is that we should never just be content with what God has given us. Of course, we can enjoy it, we can celebrate it, we can be thankful for it, but we should always be asking the question, what more do you want, God? How do you want to multiply what you're doing through us, through others? And so that's exactly what happens in this team. Now, this is pretty countercultural for us. This is counterintuitive for how we usually think, because we live in a competitive society, right? And so this would be the equivalent of, picture you have like you've been given a group that's working on a project together, and you have one of the smartest kids in class, one of the people who try the hardest. You know what this is like, where you're in a group like this, and you generally just kind of make them do all the work. But imagine you said, hey, let's take that person, you can go join another group. We're good without you. Right? You wouldn't do that. You'd be like, no, we want you in our group. You're going to do all the work, and we're going to all get A's because of you. Right? Or imagine you're on a team, like a sports team, and you take your 2 best players, and you trade them, or you let them go play for your rival. Like we wouldn't do that. We'd be like, no, that's subtraction. We lose something. In fact, kind of timely, but I don't know if you guys saw in the news that a pharmaceutical company called Pfizer claims to have a COVID vaccine that's pretty effective. And one of the fascinating things about Pfizer is they haven't shared kind of their recipe for the vaccine, or they haven't shared how they're building it with any other pharmaceutical companies. They're not working with them, even though that would probably lead to a quicker vaccine. It would lead to more people being able to develop a vaccine. No, they want to be the first because it's going to make them the most money, right? And so they don't just see it as how can we help the most people. They see it as competition. And so we're kind of intuitively wired to think if we send our best people out, or if we share some of our best people, the result is subtraction. But it's not so when it comes to the gospel of Jesus. When it comes to sharing the good news of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, and the transformation that can happen to all when they encounter Him, and the connection that they can have back to God the Father, when it comes to sharing that, it's not subtraction, it's multiplication. That's what we see in the early Jesus movement. Now, I'll give you an example of this from my own life. A few years ago, when I was pretty new to Fellowship Denver, I helped start a small group. And in that small group, we started with just like 10 people. But eventually it kind of gained some traction, and lots more people started joining. Our group eventually got to about 25 people. And we were in this really tiny living room that I used to live in this house right over on Lincoln Street, not too far from the church. And we were in this tiny living room, and we were just cramming people in it, which back in the day you could do. You didn't have to be 6 feet apart. And it was like, we got to do something about this. And so we said, what if our group became 3 groups? Now, for many people, this might look like subtraction, because we took 4 of our best leaders, some of my closest friends, and we said, why don't you guys go out and start one group? And then we took 3 others, same thing, close friends, good leaders, and said, you go out and start a group. So it seems like we're losing 7 people. But the result was those 4 people who started one group, that group actually gained 20 more people within a year. And the other group with 3 people gained 10 more people within a year. And then we lost 7 people in our group, but we made room for another 10 to join our group. Now, don't audit my math on this, don't check the math, but if you add it all up, basically what you get was a group that was once about 25 people grew to about 65 people. More people got to experience the rich community we had, the friendship we had, and more people got to learn more about the gospel of Jesus because of that decision to send people out. Now, I know some of you maybe even think about student fellowship like this. Like, student fellowship might be the place for you to kind of escape from your friends. It might be kind of the place where you don't have to encounter your school community or your neighborhood or the people you play sports with. And it's kind of, you can kind of segregate it in your life or separate it as your time to kind of experience Christian community. But that's not the goal of student fellowship. We want to see it as a multiplication movement. There's many teenagers, there's middle and high schoolers throughout our city that don't know about the good news about Jesus. And so our hope is to see God move through each of us, each of our students and their families, to reach different people in their schools and in their neighborhoods. And so I want you to think about this week. Think about the multiplication that could come if you were to see student fellowship as something to share and to see yourself as sent out to your group of friends, to your school, to your neighborhood as a place to share that. Imagine what God could do through our group. And so that's my challenge for you this week. I want to invite you guys as a family to have some time of response, to think about some ways that you could do this and to have some discussion around it. And so now would be a good time for that.